heading into the weekend, they had put an emphasis on creating momentum before the Christmas break, just wanting to bank a good amount of points so that they can feel good about themselves in the Christmas break and position themselves to be within striking distance of the sort of playoff peloton, if you will, which frankly, they're within striking distance right now. But it's when you look at it, and so now obviously they won one of those games in a shootout, again, not in regulation. They're still stuck on, I believe it's five regulation wins, which is worst in the league.
Yeah,
which, you should keep under consideration whenever you're looking at the standings. But
actually, they're tied with Seattle in that department. Seattle's got 5 too, so they're both dead last in the NHL.
Yeah, right. They're worse. They are worst in the league. So, I mean, just look at Seattle. But like Seattle's very indicative. Like Seattle has a 397 points percentage because I think Montreal also leads the league in post-regulation time victories. So, because they have 3 shootout wins and they have 4 overtime wins. So that's 7 victories after. I think they're tied with Toronto, if I'm not mistaken, for first in that. Yeah, Toronto has 4 shootout wins and 3 overtime wins. So they also have 7 wins after regulation. So Seattle's sitting at, 397. This is prior to games Monday night. Obviously, I don't know if Seattle's playing tonight. And Montreal's at 482 in terms of points percentage. So all is relative. But so Gallagher says that the team is focused this stretch. This really put an emphasis on this stretch to finish strong. They have 1 win and 1 loss so far. But you look at their schedule, and it's not crazy what he's saying, because they got Pittsburgh coming in here on Wednesday. They're a bit of a mess. They're kind of reeling. I mean, Kyle Dubas had to come out today and defend and give, Mike Sullivan the dreaded vote of confidence, which he got, which means he'll be fired within the next few weeks. But anyhow, you got the Penguins on Wednesday. You got the Islanders in here on Saturday. The Islanders are playing really well. You got the Jets, who just lost Kyle Connor, perhaps long term. They have a few other injury situations, so they're in a bit of a precarious spot. Then they're in Minnesota, which has been a bit of a mess all season, but have been playing better under Hines, obviously. But still, much better after the coaching change. And then they're in Chicago in their last game before the break. So if you look at it, the 5 games that remain in this 7-game stretch that Brendan identified, or that the Canadiens have identified as their opportunity to make a move before the Christmas break, and it's not outrageous that they could maybe take, including getting to overtime a couple of times and whatever. If they could take 8 out of 10 points somehow, then they'd be, whatever combination that would be, they'd go into the break with 35 points and would be kind of in the thick of things, you got to think. Which some people might think is a bad thing, and frankly, I think it would be hollow. And listen, right now they're sitting 12, 13, and 3 after 28 games. As we mentioned, 5 regulation wins out of 12, a minus 21 goal differential, 6-9-1 on home ice, 6-4-2 on the road. So credit for that. But 6-9-1 on home ice. There's a lot of indicators, and that's without even going into the deeper metrics and the possession stats and chances and all that stuff. There's a lot of things that would suggest that even if they do enter the break at 35, like it's all of this is artificially being propped up for them. But if they want to believe it, then that's their prerogative. Yeah.
I mean, they've played more games than everybody they're chasing, except for Tampa. So
yeah.
I mean, it's not crazy when you present the state of their opponents, but what's the thing that Martin Saint-Louis has been saying the most often these past few weeks? We're chasing consistency. That's he seems to repeat that phrase every day.
Yeah.
And so it's not necessarily a matter of who's their opponent, it's themselves, how they play, how can they find consistency and build on that. I mean, me personally, call me, I don't know, a pessimist or whatever, but I don't believe in their chances of making the playoffs, even with any sudden
How about
push.
I call you a realist? I'll call you a realist instead.
Thank you very much. But I can understand, though, that they want to build a winning streak, because at some point, if they want to understand what they've got to see what works and what's not, and what doesn't, and what does it look like when it works. You have to be able to generate some momentum, earn some success. I'll say, okay, our progress is going in that direction, or that player is making progress, or that part of our game is making progress.
Mhm.
So you need to create some a bit of momentum, have a winning streak at some point to establish that, and have some beliefs and some things that are more concrete to build on. Do I think that they're able to do that at this point? Honestly, I don't, because when you have a head coach that's so concerned with the fact that they're lacking consistency, they might be able to stop a losing skid. But in order to build like 4 or 5 games winning streak, I mean, kudos to them if they're able to do so. And I understand them as players that they want to do that and more. But the proof remains to be shown to me that they're that type of team that they're
Well, I
able to do
mean,
that.
well, their longest winning streak of the season has been 2 games. They've done
Yeah,
it 4 times.
yeah,
Um, and honestly, if you look at the 4 times, like the game in Detroit and the game against Boston at home, that was legitimate. Even though both of those wins were in overtime, that was legitimate. They played well in those 2 games. But a few of the other ones, like they beat Columbus and Winnipeg at home back to back, not back to back, but they beat Columbus and Winnipeg at home before heading to Vegas, where they played quote unquote the best game they have played since Martin St. Louis took over as coach. Those games were not Picasso's, as Marty likes to say. They were bad. Anaheim and San Jose consecutive wins. I mean, the Anaheim game with both of those games were not great. So really, even if you looked at it through the prism of how many games in a row have they played well, and Marty keeps pointing back to that Detroit, Boston, Vancouver, Calgary stretch,
yeah.
what and that's so
As
yeah,
if they
like I
played
mean,
great against Vancouver, for instance. Yeah,
yeah, they lost 5-2 to the Canucks, but he puts it in there like that's to him
yeah.
that's the bar. That's what showed him what this team can do is those 4 games. Boston, 100%. They played a great game at home, a lot of intensity. It really
Mm-hmm.
was impressive. Even the Calgary game, even though they lost 2-1, um, played a pretty good game. But then everything went to hell, and then like 2 games later was the game that showed Marty exactly how bad the Canadiens could be when they went into Boston, total no-show, lost 5-2, but probably looked worse than that. You were at that game. I mean, that was a total disaster. So, um, but I kind of think like what you just said, like they have to have a winning streak at some point. I guess they don't have to, but the fact that they find themselves where they are without having won more than 2 games in a row is kind of encouraging if I were the Canadians. Like, I just feel like, listen,
Yeah.
like we've managed to get to this point. We're not out of it. We haven't even played our best hockey. We haven't even strung together a few wins. Let's try and do that. Let's see what
Yeah.
happens if we do that, sort of thing. I'm with you. Like, but I'm with you and I'm not in the sense that I'm with you that there's nothing this team has done to convince me that they should even be thinking about playoff contention, even though they're all competitors.
No,
Everyone
no,
should be
they got
thinking
to
about
do
the
it. They
playoffs.
got to do it.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
where I would disagree is that they have not showed me that they're incapable of having a winning streak. Like, I mean, it's possible. Like they have to string together, they have to do something they haven't done this year, basically, which is to string together 3, 4 quality performances where they don't have a lapse in the middle of the game or at the beginning of the game or at some point in the game where they just start leaking chances and not
Mm-hmm.
having the puck and like every game that happens. Um, so is that impossible? No, but is it likely? I would agree with you. It's not, but I think this upcoming schedule creates that possibility.
Yeah.
It's possible. So because frankly, it's the other reason why it's interesting. They're kind of aiming for Christmas is because historically, and Marty now has real life trauma over this. This trip, the coming up, starting in Winnipeg on Monday. next Monday, I should say. This trip is the one that kills the Canadian season, year after year after year. The trip. The Blackhawks had the circus trip for all that time, and now that the Cirque du Soleil has taken over the Bell Center over the holiday period, we should also call this the Christmas trip for the circus trip. Sorry, the circus trip
Yeah,
for the Canadians. And that game in Winnipeg will start a stretch of 7 straight games away from home, broken up obviously by a pretty extended Christmas break. They have like 6 days between games. Um, so let's see if they can change that narrative. I don't know if they can necessarily. It's last year it proved disastrous and was the most humbling point of Martin St. Louis' brief coaching career. But
yeah,
let's see what
and,
they and he have learned from it.
yeah. And the year before that was the year where they were the most banged up. And
That was
I
that
remember they
was
went
the
to
final
Florida.
nail
It
in
was
Dom
like,
Ducharme's coffin. Yeah,
yeah,
that
it
was the
was
final
like
nail in Dom Ducharme's coffin. Yes.
it was David Savard and the Kids. That was the band. The name of the band was David Savard and the Kids. It was
Cam
like,
Hillis played on that trip.
yeah, that's right,
Cam Hillis played an NHL game on that trip. That
right.
was just crazy, and people were that was that the trip where everyone just kept getting COVID as the trip went along, and they had to leave
Yeah,
people in various cities. I
yeah,
think Alex Romanov had to be left in Florida with Jake Evans, if I remember correctly. But
right. I
and
think
then
that's
and
what's
then and then Romanov's wife started posting pictures of them in a boat in South Florida, just hanging around having fun. Yeah. Anyhow,
Yeah, and I think that's
that's
when Hervé Pinard played his first game too, or around that
yeah,
point.
yeah. That was
There's plenty of historical reminders to tell us that around Christmas is never good for the Canadians. So trying to change that narrative could be a good idea. I express my doubt because I fully sympathize with all those fans out there who say, you know what, let them sink, let them finish as
hmm
low in the standings as possible so they can get as high a draft pick as possible. I'm with you guys. The only thing is that at some point, if you embrace that rebuild and you say we need one more quality prospect, you still that team won't start from scratch again. They're going to go with the young players that they've got. So the young players that they've got who are not injured, so mainly Suzuki, Caulfield, Gooley, those guys. At some point, they need to build on something. They need to gain momentum uh, individually and collectively too, and have the feeling that their contribution to the group brings the team forward and makes it go somewhere. Because that rebuild is also, it's not banking on just some abstraction on what future players could become. It's also the young players from now who
hmm
have to get better. And at some point, that's why when Martin St. Louis says that winning is part of development, that's what he means. So that's why I understand also the attraction of saying, you know what, aligning, even though it might not, most likely won't end up in the playoff spot, just getting a good track record of gathering wins, a few wins in a row, could make those players have the feeling that they're taking more ownership of the team and they're bringing it in the proper direction. Otherwise, it remains stale and it's like, well, one day our young players will be good, but you want to have the feeling sometimes that things are actually improving, getting better, even though they're far, far from the destination.